Alright guys, today we are back with another History Matters video. This time, it's one other short one. It is When Did Britain and America Stop Hating Each Other? Short animated documentary. Now to be fair, when it comes to some things, I would say America has never stopped hating Britain. When it comes to sports, or things like, or even military, Americans will still be very patriotic and diss on the Redcoats. Rightfully so. Suck it, Redcoats. We handed you an L in 1776, even though actually you were going to win that war if the French had not intervened on our behalf. But god damn it, we're still going to brag about it. Honestly, they really stopped. I think 1812 was really just, I wouldn't say they hated each other. I think that was just a test of America wanted, as part a little bit of Monroe Doctrine, somewhat. No, not Monroe. Yeah, Monroe. Yeah, Monroe. America, I'd say, wanted to control America and really just start the process. I would say 1812 was where the process of America wanted to start really kicking out Europeans from the Western Hemisphere. And then, they tried and failed. The United States military in 1812 was a nightmare. They were poorly organized. So poorly organized. Oh, it is. I took a class on US military history, and the United States military organization has never been good. Our military, reading that, surprised me that this nation is currently the world's lone superpower. However, that will be changing in the next coming decade or so. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, the United States has been the hegemon of the world. But yeah, it's just been, after reading all that and being like, how the hell did the United States become a military superpower? Is it just because we can produce so fucking much that's why that overlooks the whole rest of the failings of the American military? But aside from that, I forgot what point I was making. I would say after 1812, after the failed War of 1812, I would say the United States and Britain started to get pretty close ties. There was nothing really left for them to fight over, and there was no point in them fighting. But I really wouldn't say that they were best friends, because I think Britain was somewhat close to assisting the Confederates in the United States Civil War. So I would really say that, and then of course, American somewhat acceptance, and no, the Irish were treated pretty poor. I would say 1900s. I would say World War I was when Britain and America really stopped hating each other and started pursuing that close friendship. And then World War II, I would say, cemented that friendship. I just spent 3 minutes, pretty much the length of this video, rambling. Let's go ahead and actually watch the video now.
It would be an understatement to say that Britain and the USA's relationship got off to a rocky start.
Brits go!
1812, Britain...
Good job! Wasn't that the Canadians, though? Or was that the British that burned it? No, it was the British. It wasn't the Canadians.
and America were at war, but just over a century later they were fighting shoulder to shoulder in World War I, which obviously raises the question, when did Britain and America become allies? There had to be a point where both went from actively disliking each other to working alongside.
You suck, nerd.
Each other. Now, before continuing, it's important to note that even in the immediate aftermath of independence, America and Britain still had strong economic ties.
Well, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
This isn't to say that things were always great between the two, and there were some pretty major conflicts of interest in the years after the War of 1812 finished. The first and perhaps the most obvious was the Monroe Doctrine, established in 1823. This was where the United States, by threat of military intervention, declared an end to any new European colonial adventures in the Americas. And for Britain, this was potentially a problem because it had economic interest in South America.
Oh, they started turning their eyes towards South America. Oh, yeah, makes sense.
In reality, though, it wasn't too much of a problem at all, because in 1833 it landed a force on the Falkland Islands and America did nothing. In 1840...
Yeah. Well, maybe because of how long it has remained under the control. I mean, yeah, Falklands technically lies in the Western Hemisphere, but I don't know. I don't really count it. Like, if you talk to me about, you're like, oh, the Americas, I'm not gonna draw a map of the Falklands included there. I'll have a map of North America, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean islands, but I'm not gonna have Falklands. I don't consider the Falklands part of the Americas. I don't know if that's just me, and because it's been under British rule for so long. But that's how I look at it.
42, the US did warn Britain against
Back up.
interference in Hawaii, which Britain did heed because America's international power was certainly growing. And it was this fact that America was a rapidly growing great power whose interests could no longer be ignored, which would dominate Anglo-American relations
Great Power
for the
Club.
following century. So the next major event which could have changed the Anglo-American dynamic was the American Civil War, which broke out in 1861.
I just love the faces on the characters.
Britain had already abolished slavery at this point, and so you would think that it would have preferred the Union over the Confederacy. But you'd be wrong. Now,
Yeah.
Britain had no great affection for the Confederacy in its slaveholding practices. Its preferential treatment was purely economic, mostly due to cotton imports.
Yep.
Britain did
I stand by this. Stars go here. This is something that I stand by. The dissolution of slavery is purely based upon economic. It is not based upon morality. Slavery would have continued to exist. Now, of course, it is completely immoral to own slaves. I would never own one. If it was legal, I would never own one. Or well, at least I'd like to say I would never own one. However, dissolution of slavery was mainly economic. It was far cheaper to pay someone like a penny a day or whatever the fuck the amount someone would get paid back then in the factory or working on your farm over buying a human being, forcing them to work, and then also you have to pay for their food and the roof over their head so that they could survive and not get sick and be healthy enough to continue to work your fields for free. That's a far more costly venture than just paying someone a few cents a day and they're only there for like 8, 10, 12 hours a day or whatever, and then they go home at the end of their shift. Far cheaper. Far cheaper, right? Way cheaper. Instead of paying, what, hundreds of dollars, maybe thousands of dollars for one person. I don't know what they costed, what people cost back then. But you know what I'm saying. And by when the creation of the United States was happening, there was questions on already dissolving slavery then because it was already starting to become uneconomical. However, then the spinning jenny, I believe it was called, it was some cotton spinning machine that made picked cotton easier to spin or whatever and be used economically or whatever. I can't remember the proper terms. And because of that drastically cheapened the cost of slavery. So guess what happened? Slavery continued on for another few decades. It's really because of economics that slavery ended, sadly. People like to think things end because of morality. No, it's because of economics.
Did consider formally recognizing the Confederacy.
'cause of money.
Anglo-American relations were severely harmed by what's called the Trent
Yeah,
Affair. This was where the US government seized a ship with Confederate diplomats headed for Britain, which to Britain looked like the USA telling it who it could and could not speak to. In the end, cooler heads prevailed and Britain didn't get involved.
Well, I mean, that would be... Oh, this is where we get into the complications of secession and legality of I guess, Confederates rebelling against the Union. In a sense, you could make an argument that those Confederate diplomats are not legal diplomats since they're revolting against the Union, who is the government of the United States. It's like, all right, if you allow them to go, and also then if Britain talks to those diplomats, then that is essentially acknowledging the Confederates as a separate nation from the United States, which then is a whole political nightmare for the Union. So, that's how I'm thinking of it in my head. I could be wrong.
although it did construct a very powerful warship, the CSS Alabama, for the Confederacy, and after the Civil War was over, Britain paid compensation to the United States. Thus, only 50 years away from World War I, Britain and America still didn't really care much for each other. So what changed this?
Yeah, so far I'm correct.
Relations actually started to improve during Britain's border dispute with Venezuela in 1895. This developed into somewhat of a crisis, and the US intervened and arbitrated, siding mostly with Britain. For Britain, America had conducted itself in a well-mannered fashion and given Britain most of what it had wanted, and for America, by accepting American arbitration, Britain had yielded its right to influence South America. The other reason for Anglo-American rapprochement was simple: converging interests. America had emerged from its civil war a more centralized industrial power, and after its defeat of Spain in 1898, it possessed a global empire too. And for Britain, things were rapidly changing as well. Its empire and global position was being threatened by Russia and the newly formed Germany. Britain had long practiced a policy of isolationism with respect to the European powers, but since they too were industrializing, this had the potential to threaten Britain's position. Thus, her most natural ally seemed to be the United States, since it was half a world away and had its own sphere of influence, plus they spoke the same language and shared many values. It was at the turn of the 20th century under President Theodore Roosevelt that America and Britain really started to become friends, particularly with respect to one foreign policy stance. They didn't like Germany. This agreement allowed for Britain to move its fleet away from its Caribbean colonies back to Britain to defend
You would think Teddy would like the militaristic Germany. Guess not.
Itself from Germany, while security in the Caribbean would fall to the US.
We've got this.
After the First World War broke out, Germany's actions such as U-boat attacks on American shipping and the Zimmermann telegram, combined with the fact that if Britain and France lost the war, they wouldn't be able to pay their American loans back, assured US intervention on their side. And from that point on,
again, money.
Both the US and UK were largely in the same camps, barring a couple of mishaps here and there. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thank you.
Alright, so pretty much my guess was right. They started becoming friends because of World War I. Yeah, I rambled a lot during this video. I've got nothing else to add here at the end. This was When Did Britain and America Stop Hating Each Other? Short animated documentary by History Matters. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.